Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Hannah Mons and I'm the EVP of Global here at Lamanu. In my many years in the influence marketing space, I've witnessed a real shift in how brands, or the most successful brands I should say, are winning. In 2026, creator programs are no longer merely a marketing experiment. They're a real core sales channel within their own right. But many brands are hitting a ceiling where doubling their roster means that they're doubling their headaches. We're here to talk about that today and how we can break that ceiling. But before we dive into the tech, I'd love to understand a bit more about how this partnership came about. So Andy, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us more about how the partnership between Lamanu and Superfiliate came to be?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Hannah. For everybody out there, I'm Andy. I'm one of the co-founders here at Superfiliate, and this webinar is particularly fun for me because Tony and I go way back. Actually, I think even before Superfiliate was a thing. I happened to be a friend of one of Tony's investors way back in the day, and then we started the company, and he's like, "Oh, you're doing this influencer stuff? I feel like one of our friends, this company I work with, Lumanu, his name's Tony, he's amazing, is doing that stuff," and we got the chance to meet. But it's really just been a really cool, parallel journey. And, those paths eventually had the opportunity to converge, very much so because of a lot of what we'll be talking about today, where, for the last 5 years, we've been trying to build a platform and tooling to help, influencer managers scale themselves and, continue to grow programs and generate return for their brands without having to add more folks and more processes and more people and things like that. And we were fortunate enough this year to get to do that on both a product and a partnership level. So that's a little bit of the background of how this all came together, and it's been just an awesome experience.
And I'm Tony, the co-founder and CEO of Lamanu. So super excited to be here with both Hannah and Andy to talk through. I'm sure everyone that's joined us today, marketers are being asked to do so much with increasingly tighter deadlines, tighter timelines. You just have so much on your plate, and hopefully getting out of this webinar, you'll see some tips and insights on how to get more done with less, and hopefully go see your kids' piano recital and then have your nights and weekends back, right? And then not be drowned out in paperwork and admin work. But yeah, super excited to share some insights and have a great conversation here.
Thanks for that, Tony. Thanks, Andy. Andy, you talk a lot about, why more creators shouldn't mean more headcount necessarily. Can you tell us, where is the wall that brands normally hit?
100%. I mean, I think what we, have seen for years and years is just, people, these programs, the funny thing about them is they work. However, working continues to change over time as you reach different levels of scale and what you need to do. And you start to get to a certain point where even just keeping up with simple things like sample requests or gifting or seeding or application management becomes such an overwhelming process. Anders, my co-founder, has always had a really amazing line that most of our best customers and creator marketers that we work with actually don't have a discovery problem. They actually have a filtering problem because they have built an inbound engine that has so many partnerships coming their way that they're actually trying to figure that out. So there does just come this point where the act of manually reviewing all the people who you want to work with and who want to work with you and all the steps associated, and just gets to a point where you really are unable to scale, without using either two things, either headcount, which is obviously, not what you're hoping to do, or using some sort of automation, in that process. And it's been one of our product philosophies from the start, has just been thinking about thematically, how do we help our users automate everything except for the relationship building and the things that make them, great at what they do. And a lot of that involves, all of these different touch points, even sometimes specifically on the creator side when it comes to onboarding and things like that, which I know is, one of the things that Tony probably has more experience than anyone out there on. So Tony, maybe I'll let you weigh in on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And, to piggyback off of what Andy and Hannah are saying, as you're increasing the number of creators you're working with, what we found is, as a marketer, there's basically 3 points of friction. One is just the day-to-day work of you as a marketer, right? This is the fun stuff, the relationship, writing great creative briefs, reviewing content, doing all the things that you studied in school for, that you're excited to wake up in the morning and do. But then there's 2 other things that really just suck up your time and suck up your passion. One is all of the little things, the hand-holding to get creators set up. It doesn't matter if you're asking them to jump on a Google form, jump through a software, that onboarding process. Then the other part is just dealing with internal dependencies. I wish marketers could do whatever they want and live in a vacuum, but they don't. You got to deal with legal, you got to deal with finance. Everything you do, every dollar that you send out, other hands have to be in a pot and approve it. And it's all of those dependencies and blockers that typically drag down the process. Whether you're working with 10 creators or 100 creators, right? Those dependencies, those slowdowns just increase a lot. And that's really the silent killer of a lot of these programs in order for you to scale. This zaps up so much time. And it gets more complicated as you're working with, not just like flat payments, but other incentives. And we'll talk through that in a bit. Sometimes you have these great ideas as a marketer on how to make your program more effective, but then you realize in order to execute on those ideas, you require buy-in from finance. You got to explain things to procurement. You got to get legal to approve in certain contract languages, and all of those things add up.
Yeah, the only thing I'll just bounce off of that real quick, because I also think, now having gotten to watch, 5+ years in this ecosystem is, what Tony's talking about though, there as those barriers, they only increase as companies get larger and they go international, multi-geography, they go multi-product. There's just all these different, finance teams get more sophisticated. There's more, all of these things start to happen. And I think there is just like this natural, institutionalization of these programs that ends up slowing things down. And I think, that's where you're really making a strong effort to make sure that you keep that nimbleness and agileness that like made you great and got you there at scale. And I think, we see the bottlenecks really start to present themselves, as you continue to expand.
Yeah. Tony, anything more to add on that?
I think one thing that we're going to hit on a lot here, so far we're setting up a stage of, there's a lot of these problems that I'm sure the folks in the audience can resonate with and feel themselves in various degrees. It's funny, I had a friend who was a very successful marketer at a DTC brand, several hundred million in revenue, gets acquired by a holding group. Raise your hand if you heard this story before. And then all of a sudden just being bombarded by things that never was an issue before. Something as simple as like, I can't just use Venmo. I got to now use this like insane process, Ariba, Coupa, et cetera. So, hopefully as we go through this, we'll walk through, like, we're not only going to be peppering you with problems, right? We're not here just to be a therapy session. We want to actually give you some hands-on solutions, whether it's things you can do differently, independent of software, or things that you can do with software that hopefully can address some of these bottlenecks and manual work that goes with scaling a program.
Great, thanks, Tony. And I know we talk about, a lot about sales, but for many brands, the content and the rights to that content are the true ROI. How do we move away from spreadsheets? You talked about tech, Tony. I'm keen to understand a bit more about that, so that people can pay both the commissions and also the content fees as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, I know the title of this webinar is how do you 10x the results without 10xing the work? One thing that we want to talk through is, as you think about scaling the program, I think we all agree that we really want to 10x the impact of these programs. And it's not always about doing more and more and more. It's sometimes doing more with less. So I know we're working on more creators, going from creator programs from 10 to 50 to 100 to 500. But for each one of those relationships, how do you make it so that it's not just I pay you, you post, we're done, let's move on to the next person, a one-off billboard. And I think Andy here at Superfiliate really built a great system where when you think about marketers, when you think about creators, they're not only just marketing channel, but they can also be sales drivers, right? And those are two things that can work really well together, and maximizing the ROI from those relationships that you've spent so much time building and cultivating. But just getting as much as you can out of every single relationship. And Andy, what are your thoughts there about, you went through all that effort to find that great creator. How do you get the most out of that one creator? Oh, I think you're muted.
I was trying to keep my echo off. 100%. I mean, one of the things that we're always thinking about is like, as obviously in vogue now, some of the stuff that you even mentioned there, Hannah, is like creators are playing a role at all the pieces of the funnel, every stage of the funnel, whether it's awareness, mid funnel, bottom of funnel, actual sales. And I think like it is kind of, almost naive to think that there's like a certain economic model that makes sense for all of those across the board. And I think like being really flexible about different ways to, compensate creators based on where, what is being done at a given moment in time. So, we like to think about how are there hybrid deals where there's like a certain, cost associated for almost like time and materials of like creating a piece of content, but then how can you, loop in a creator on the upside of that? Maybe it's not just, affiliate sales. Of course, a creator that's got 100,000 followers is probably going to be able to push volume. But what about that creator that has 2,000 followers, but is incredible on camera, really resonates with the brand, and ends up building, your top performing ad for the next month? What if you were giving them either a percentage of ad spend or a tiny commission on the sales that are being driven through that content? And I think, what we're seeing now is more people are waking up to that, but now they're saying, oh, this is working. However, that was an extremely manual process. I need to be able to do a lot more of this, but like the infrastructure is not there to set it up. So, thinking about all the new things that are introduced there, content rights management, even just understanding how much do I owe this person, making sure that that person knows that they're going to get paid and actually understand the economic relationship. It's not everybody knows the ins and outs of like paid media spend and how the meta algorithm is going to help allocate budget to your content versus someone else's, etc. And I think we're just seeing now like there is this huge expansion and opportunity in terms of the impact that this content and then creators can have at all parts of the funnel. But however, now like needing to catch up on the tooling side to make sure that people are not only able to like execute on that, but then execute on that at scale on top of all the other stuff that they're still responsible for. And, that they were responsible for this time last year, which is paid partnerships, briefing content, all of that type of stuff. So that's definitely a big part of, what we're seeing. But I think the most exciting part is, at the highest level, unequivocally more budget is going to this segment, when it comes to creative and creative production. And I think we're only going to continue to see that trend. And we're super excited about that. And want to make sure that we bring everyone the tools to take advantage of that.
One thing that I found helpful is as Andy talks about tools, there's a framework that I use as a manager of teams. You guys might be familiar with this acronym, jobs to be done, or JTBD. And one of the things, like, imagine if you're a marketer and as you're building your creator program, it's as if you're building your own company, right? And you're the CEO of this company. And your job as a CEO is to drive as much revenue as possible. The way I like to think about it is every creator has a job that they're really good at. And it's your job to not only figure out what that job is, but structure your incentives and compensation so that it drives the behaviors that you want. Because as we all know, right, someone that could be a very awesome salesperson might not be the best marketer. So every company has a different framework, but one that I found works really well is at a high level, there are creators that are very good community builders. So these are folks that their content just organically works really well. They're not necessarily the one with gigantic audience following, but they have really high organic engagement. They do a lot of great video content. They don't require very hand-holdy briefing. They're just very good at what they do. There's another job to be done, for lack of a better word, the paid media person, right? They might not make the best content for their community, but they just know how to talk about your product and your brand to an audience that might not know who they are. So think about those late night, those people that used to be on QVC. These folks can market your product and you can use their content in whitelisting and paid media, and it'll work just as well with an audience that don't know who the creator is, as well as the audience that knows who the creator is. The third category, and this is what I call your money in, money out salespeople. Anyone here that watch The Secret Lives of Mormon Housewives, like these folks really are just great at selling. They're great for TikTok Reels. They're great for TikTok shop activations, for Superfiliate stores. They're just really great at driving high intent, immediate purchases. And it's good to reward those folks with an incentive on the sales. There's a final fourth category, which we're seeing a lot more of, and these are the in-person IRL creators. I was talking to one of our clients where they were at a trade show and they're trying to get their products into more retailers. And they actually found a creator and brought that creator with them to this trade show. And that creator wasn't just driving sales to consumers. That creator actually was able to pitch the product with the brand marketer to these retail locations and actually got the product placed on really great shelf in some of these retail stores. So keep an eye out for those folks as well. But yeah, basically this jobs to be done framework is a great way to think about your program. Figure out what creators are good at what jobs, compensate them accordingly to make sure that they drive the results you want in that particular job, and scale your program that way.
Yeah, it's playing to everyone's strengths at the end of the day, I guess. One of the best things to come out of this webinar so far, Tony, has been that secret Housewives of Mormon Housewives. We have that program in England, so I'm definitely going to have to check that out on some sort of internet site, because it's definitely banned in this country, I'm pretty sure. But listen, we've got a quick question from the audience. So from Travis. So Travis, thank you very much for your contribution. How many brands are paying creators out with ad spend percentage versus a flat fee?
I mean, hard to say a specific number, but the thing I can say is 12 months ago, I would guess there were maybe, 1% of our customer base was thinking about that. Fast forward 12 months to today. And, that is easily every bit of 10 to 20 to 30%, even talking to our sales team, which is usually kind of like, they're the ones that are hearing the questions about things that are coming and things that people are reading on Twitter and stuff. And I think we're seeing that just really scale. And I think also you're just seeing a market maturation in terms of this unlock of going, oh, we used to have, big creative budgets that were for quarterly shoots and things like that. And people are actually starting to make that transition of like, that budget can actually be repurposed in other ways, or they're used to going to a media agency and paying some percentage of spend on, assets they're producing, all these different models. And I think now people are realizing that this is just another channel of creative sourcing and creative strategy. And, a lot of the economic models that were, prevalent in the old paradigm are prevalent in this new paradigm. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more of that. Yeah. And ultimately, I think, there's also an education side or an education component on the creator side is I think, creators at first, everybody wants their flat fee partnership until you give them an affiliate, an affiliate arrangement where they actually end up making more. And then their eyes are like, oh, maybe I actually am open to affiliate commissions. The same thing will happen on, on the content side is everyone's reluctant, to take the like smaller upfront fee until they get that $20,000 check because they had a, piece of content take off. And I think that's where we're really trying to push the hybrid model more. So there is still that like assurance that you're at least being compensated adequately for, the time and attention. But then also giving, the opportunity for the upside. Once again, as Tony said, it's, show me the incentives, I'll show you the behavior. And I think, we're just seeing more people adopt that. And, ultimately, theoretically, that's a win-win if that's designed in the right way. But Tony, any thoughts on your side from what you all are seeing on, the dollars in, dollars out side?
The data we saw pretty much backs what you said, Andy. And just to give you some specific data points, so Lamanu processes around 1.5 billion of creator payments. And what we found is over the last few years, the transactions that have, percentage of ad spend attached to it has grown a lot. Not more than 10%, but sizably, like at least 5 to 6x what it used to be. And also the range that we've seen is typically marketers compensating at a percentage of 1 to 3%. So under contracts, they'll say like, we're going to pay you X dollars flat fee for the content production and the activation. Once it goes live, we're going to pay you 1 to 3% of the ad spend. Typically the 3% is like if you're negotiating with managed talent from one of those large talent agencies like WME and so forth. The 1% is for micro creators. And this is typically in lieu of a percentage commission for like more top of funnel type creators, because you don't want to double, like we said, like, the incentive for a creator whose content does a really good job of top and middle of funnel gets the percentage of ad spend. The other thing I'm going to call out too is in the old days, you typically would pay for content usage rights. I wouldn't say the old days. A lot of companies are still doing this. So if you're still doing this, I'm not calling you old, I promise. But one option is like, hey, let me pay you X dollars for content rights for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And then if you need to extend that, right, you just pay them in flat increments. The issue with that is sometimes you would pay for the usage rights, you start using the content and it still doesn't perform well. So now you just paid for 90 days usage rights and you probably only used it for 2 weeks. Vice versa, imagine paying for 30-day usage rights for a creator and that content is just smashing everything. It's so good. You're putting millions of dollars behind it. It's sort of like the creator didn't really get any wins, right? So the percentage is great because then rather than agreeing ahead of the time, like, do I want 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Then going through negotiation, which just takes forever, just agree to a percentage. If it does well, you put more money behind it, the creator get more comp. If it doesn't do well, they don't get as much comp. It's just one standard way of compensating.
Got it. Thanks, Tony. What I'd love to discuss, and I absolutely hate this phrase, but I'm going to say it anyway, the leaky bucket, right? So you activate 50 people, 25 go dormant. Andy, is this an engagement problem or what's going on there?
I mean, I think certainly like we always, once again, I'll quote my co-founder Anders. He always talks about net creator retention and how important of a number it is. And just thinking about all, any business or anything that you're doing, you think about like, it's always easier to keep something that you've got than go find a new one. And I think that's, whether you're selling software or, or products or whatever. And I think like we think about it the exact same way here. And like net creator retention is all about like, how are you creating how is the relationship between your brand and a creator one that creator is then going to want to propagate into the future and engage with? And I think we see people doing that in all sorts of ways. It's, of course, there's the classic community engagement stuff, sending out a newsletter. We see challenges absolutely crush it, like with various incentives. There's different things that people can set up inside our tool that are like, at this milestone, unlock this, and really just like that constant engagement loop of like keeping people entertained and rewarded for activity. But I think also just the community side of things, of people getting to connect with other people who also feel an affiliation or association with the brand is just a huge part of that. So, people who are really going out and activating these creator communities, having IRL events, like inviting people into the story. We see like merch even as like an amazing way to keep people engaged. Like they love when they get the hat or the shirt or the whatever, and they get to be like a true advocate. So, when we think about what creator retention is, yes, of course, there is a component of like creators are probably going to follow the money, and like where they're making, a lot of, financial upside, they'll probably pay attention. But also too, I think there is ultimately an element of engagement and community that is super important. And I think, to the whole, point of this entire webinar is like, community always feels really easy when it's small and it's early and, you're doing the hand-to-hand stuff. So then, the challenge becomes, how do you scale that authentic community building? How do you scale that communication where everything still feels one-to-one, or at least, somewhat attainable, and as opposed to just like a, I guess like almost like a message wall forum or anything like that. And it's definitely a challenge, but I think that's where, to Tony's point earlier, it's like automating all these pieces of the process that allow you to do the things nobody would ever expect. Oh, founders on a Zoom call with 60 creators. Wow, I would have never thought the founder of this company, and we see that stuff happening, and it's really amazing. And we hear the feedback from creators as well.
Yeah, 100%. Tony, anything to add there?
Yeah, one thing that we've noticed, a lot of these relationships. So let's say you're starting a new relationship with a creator, you love the content, you're talking about the creator brief. Now it comes down to contracting. One area that just kills the dopamine, right, is you love working with them. And you're like, I want you to produce 2 TikTok videos, give me 3 revisions, ideally get them live in 2 weeks. And by the way, I'm going to pay you net 60, net 90. Sorry, it's not my fault. My finance team, that's our standard terms to work with, insert brand, right? Whether it's Coca-Cola or what have you. And that just really sucks. Like imagine joining a new job, right? You're joining Superfiliate, Andy's the CEO, and he's like, I want you to do great work, but your first paycheck is 3 months from now. Like it's just human psychology, right? You're probably not going to go above and beyond, even if you contractually are obligated to. And that's one of the things that we found is during that contracting, for lack of a better word, as a marketer, treat the creator that you want to work with as an extension of your team. And if it comes down to it, treat it as you and the creator uniting against these old payment terms and these things that just, they are what they are, but they don't have to be that way forever. I know we've worked, and selfishly, Lumanu's whole entire thesis is how do we make it so that creators get paid faster, not just out of the goodness of our hearts, but we fundamentally do believe that generates so much goodwill at the very beginning when a contract is signed. And that translates to creators giving you 3 revisions instead of 2, turning around content in 24 hours, right, if something changes. It just going above and beyond, and then not just checking a box and working with you. Not to mention the dopamine hit of you publish content, it gets approved, it's going well, and you just get paid within 24 hours. Creators are solopreneurs, right? And they get burned out just like the rest of us. And to do great work and not get paid for your great work it's pretty shitty. And that's one of the things that I think as a marketer, empathizing them as humans really gets you a lot more juice, and they'll come back and they'll invite their friends. A creator that works with you because their friend creator says, man, you got to work with Hannah. She's a great marketer and she takes care of you. I always get paid on time, no issues. Like she goes above and beyond. It just builds goodwill, and creators talk all the time.
100%. So true. I don't think you'll hear anyone disagreeing with that in the audience, Tony. So I do have another quick question. So someone said they're working with micro-influencers for a brand, 10 creators activated so far. They're all posted, but there's been no sales. It seems their story view reach is lower than before. Do you see that as well? It seems micro-influencers that there are simply not enough clicks on links on a given story to get sales. So how do we manage expectations on the brand side? Andy, I'll throw that out to you first.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a great question. And it is like one of those cold start problems that's really hard is, and I think that's one of the things that we've been most excited about watching, the paid media component of creator partnerships become a larger part of the strategy because you actually are less dependent on these audience sizes. These creators know what these large audiences are worth. And like at the end of the day, we're playing in a marketplace and, there's prices and there's other brands bidding. And I think what I always think about is at the early stages, you can really win on relationships. Like, hey, the founder should be in there, brokering, saying, I started this company for this reason. This is why I think you're an amazing partner. I want to build a long-term partnership. Obviously, I can't pay your rate that you have, that's on your rate card, but like maybe you'll believe in me. And, maybe that takes 100 tries and 10, will hit. But then I think when you think about the specific question here of like the limited audience, that's going to be very hard to break out of because to your point, like the, Instagram story views ultimately are going to be limited to the amount of people that are following that person and feel interested in clicking that. Now, I think we're going to start to see some changes in that soon as, Instagram opens up affiliate link tagging and reels, because then all of a sudden you're kind of opening up, the ability for these creators to, move beyond their audience algorithmically, which is, I think, going to be like a really interesting dynamic and evolution for like smaller creators. But then I think going back to the paid side of this as well is thinking about, maybe those creators don't have great reach from an audience perspective right now, but maybe their content would be highly resonant, with the algorithm and you're able to put some media behind it, running partnership ads, things like that. And, being able to scale on the media side that's less dependent on audience size and allowing, and I think ultimately we're always, pushing brands like that's a proposal for them as well. They're going to get their persona, their account in front of more people on the backbone of your paid budget. So I think it's testing, hey, maybe, to what we talked about, maybe this creator is actually not a converter, but they're, a part of our content engine that's ultimately going to serve the media strategy and just getting, asking the right job to be done of the right person if we're going to go to Tony's framework. But Tony, anything for you to add there?
Andy hit most of the key points. The other thing I would add too is if you were to diagnose where the drop off in the funnel is, there are some tactical things you can do. So for instance, if you notice, I think in the question, if they're, they had X number of followers and the content's just not reaching as many people as you think, paid media amplification, whitelisting, paid partnership ads might be the way to go just to get it in front of more people. You can also use lookalike audiences to push it to not just their followers, but a wider audience. If you notice, for instance, that link clicks are happening, but those link clicks aren't turning into conversions, you might want to think about where those link clicks are going. A lot of times, not saying that the folks here are the ones creating those product description pages, but if you're driving traffic on mobile to a non-mobile optimized landing page, that could cause conversions to go down. So just really thinking hard, like maybe you drive it to a Superfiliate, shopping page, right? Or a dedicated landing page that's built for mobile for traffic that's sourced from creators. The third bit too is takes multiple views to drive a conversion. So think about putting retargeting pixels on whatever traffic that you're driving, tagging it, and then being able to run retargeting ads using other creators' content. So imagine, a creator sees something, swipes, clicks, sees your product, and then 2 days later, they see another creator content that is a different creator that talks about your product as well. It gives this illusion, it's not quite an illusion, but this impression of multiple voices talking about your product. So there's a few things there that you can diagnose. I know it's funny. My other thing is, as much as I want to be super smart about this, Claude is a great person to just sort of jam with and then try to figure out, here are my data, here are some fallback, gaps. How do I get better performance?
Great. Thanks, Tony. Really good pieces of advice from you both there. So thank you for that. Listen, it's 2026. So I've got to point out what I think is strikingly obvious that we have not covered at all on this webinar so far, and that's AI. Neither of you has mentioned it really, other than Tony, you kind of just touched upon it with Claude. So that's a nice segue. What are you guys hiding? Why are you not talking about it? Tony, I'm going to come to you first on that.
AI is, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. I'm sure you guys have all seen this too. Like I've been bombarded by just really, really shitty emails that are very clearly AI written, and it's just been growing so much. Creators are going through the same thing, right? In terms of those emails that are sourcing, there's no limit to how many AI sourcing platform that writes all your emails for you. My big advice is there are things that you want to do. My advice is, as a marketer, write down on a sheet of paper one bullet per item or task that takes up your time in any given week. And then on that list, just circle like 3 or 4 things that you want to do that actually gets you that bonus at the end of the year, that gets you that promotion, that makes you happy. And then everything else on that list, either you eliminate it, you automate it, or you delegate it. It's just not worth your time. It is not what is going to make you succeed as a marketer. And some of those things, I think, in the old days, right, you would automate things with software. The nice thing about AI is you don't just have to automate it, you can just straight up delegate it to the AI completely. Whether it's making a report for your boss to show, these 30 creators you found last quarter are driving 20% of new sales. Or it could be, getting content results in if you're not, buying one of those software that gets automated stats, opening up the TikTok videos and pulling in live stats and live engagements once per day using Claude Cowork. So that's typically a good framework there. What I would recommend not doing is delegating to AI what you should be owning as a marketer. You just can't delegate to AI fundamental relationship building, which I would include initial outreach as part of that relationship building. Negotiation is probably another piece. But yeah, I'm curious, Andy, what are your thoughts there?
Right. Well, I think I have like the Andy and the Superfiliate perspective. Like on the Andy side, it's such an exciting time. And I think like what we've been talking about so much, just as individuals on the team is just like, you ask the AI. Ask, if you have a question, like it's always like, oh, how do I use this? And you're like, ask it how to use it. And I think that has been like such an interesting unlock for so many people that I've watched. But when I think about us more as a company and how we're thinking about it, like I view, almost in this, like, what does Superfiliate exist to do? And it is to help our users accomplish some outcome. And like, I see, everyone's getting overwhelmed with what they're reading on Twitter. I use Claude to automate my entire life, this, that, whatever, the doom, whatever. You feel behind, you get overwhelmed. You're like, what am I doing? And I think like our perspective as a product organization is saying, we need to bring that to our users. We need to be the experts as to like how people are able to take advantage of that. And like, there will be some moments where that's being fairly prescriptive, some moments where that's being fairly general. But I think, we view it as we are the platform. We are we need to be the experts and we need to make it very accessible to all these people. So then they're able to go, because we know everyone's boss is saying, what are you doing with AI? You need to be doing more. And, we think an amazing solution is, well, Superfiliate's on it and Superfiliate's building this tool for me. And this is how my work has changed. And this is how I'm going to do twice as much next quarter because of this. So we really want to be able to bring it to people. But then I think, also thinking about how are we interacting next to AI? What is AI going to be doing in the context of our software? What are users going to be doing that inside of Claude that they'll never do inside of, our platform? And, we're just very focused on it. I think we're very excited about it. And I think ultimately one thing that's been really interesting is, 3 years ago, before we, this was really the conversation, we were talking about, what we called at the time our automations platform, which the thesis behind it was, as I mentioned earlier, automate everything except for relationship building. Exactly what Tony said. And I think, now we really just see this as an accelerant to that vision and mission of like making sure that our users can spend all of their time finding incredible creators, partnering with them at a much deeper level and in a more engaged way. And then, hopefully fixing that leaky bucket, Hannah, that you mentioned by, allowing people to retain them longer because of a more fruitful relationship. So, that's our perspective on it and a little bit of my perspective on it. But certainly, a topic to be covered here in 2026.
100%. And I think, if you can take away all the admin from people and make sure that they're focusing on that relationship building, then you're going to have a winning strategy at the end of the day. So one thing I wanted to talk about, just to kind of wrap up, you've got people looking at messy spreadsheets, maybe even as we speak, well, hopefully not on this webinar, but after we speak, just after. So what would be the structural change you would recommend to them so that they're no longer doing that? Tony, I'll come to you first.
So I'll defer to Andy for how to get rid of spreadsheets. But one of the structural changes that I would encourage every marketer to do is figure out where you can cut out dependencies. I think we all agree it's just so much faster to act from idea to execution to results if you're able to go as fast as you want without having to be slowed down by finance, procurement, other teams, contractors, etc. So really figure out like what is slowing you down and how much of that is because you're waiting on other people. And we can always work with you, and there's a lot of great software out there that can help you get rid of those dependencies. It might take some internal convincing, but once you do it once, it pays off dividends. So that's my goal, right? Is I think structurally figure out how to get rid of as many dependencies as possible so you can run the program that you want to run, scale it as fast as you want to scale, without having to be bogged down by long email chains to finance and legal every weekend.
Yeah, that's never fun. Andy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the spreadsheet thing is so funny. Is like I always think about even within our own company. It's like we have our CRM, but then I also have my 10 spreadsheets that are also listed people. So I think like our perspective has always been, if people are using spreadsheets for things, we want to know why and how, and we're gonna make decisions on like where should we automate that. I think like if we look at our product, there's people are gonna have such nuanced workflows, and like this is actually one of the huge nice benefits of AI is I think over time, the way our product is able to morph around somebody's existing workflow is going to increase and it's going to be extremely interesting. But I think for us, we're just trying to make sure that we understand what people are doing inside of these spreadsheets, why they're turning to them, and then how can we productize that in a means that applies to a lot of people. However, to the broader conversation here, I think we're in such an exciting time where Google Sheets can be an entirely new engine now with Gemini sitting inside of it, and like there's probably going to be some fun stuff that's maybe like tangentially related to your program that you could be doing in spreadsheets. So I think we like to think about like having Superfiliate as a source of truth and a information store, and then but allowing people to be flexible with what they do with that and take actions on that, and move data where it needs to go and where it needs to live. And sometimes that's going to be workflows inside of our tool, and other times that might be living in other places. And I think we want to build like the flexibility to support that. But ultimately, people have been talking about the death of the spreadsheet for a very, very, very long time. And I think we've all been using them for a very, very, very long time. So we're going to keep doing our best, but they're probably not going away tomorrow.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's hope not, because I really love spreadsheets still, to be honest. So, but I'm sure, Tony, you'll be on me tomorrow about how I can pimp them up with AI for sure. But well, listen, this has been such an interesting conversation. I think everyone in the audience will agree. I'd love to wrap up. Any final thoughts at all from you both, about everything that we've spoken about today? And Andy, I'm going to come to you first, just to wrap it up.
I mean, for my wrap up here, it'll be, lean into the automations, lean into relationship building. And, I think the thing I really want to reiterate here is, not to gas up Lumanu too much though, but I truly do think payments are trust, and like the timing and consistency and predictability of those is super important. And, one thing I didn't get to say earlier is sometimes people will find me on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, and it's creators, and they find out that they're working with Superfiliate, and the only message I ever get that is a complaint is about payments. And it's people saying, I haven't got paid by this brand or whatever. Can you help? And I'm like, well, I don't really necessarily know that, but I'm not the person in charge. But that's just the one thing is, it really is a way to stick out. It's a way to drive creator retention, acquisition, the community Tony mentioned earlier. So, always good to just get up here and, get to partner with a best-in-class solution that helps us deliver that for our customers.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks,
Tony,
Andy.
follow that now.
I have to say, thanks, Andy. To segue off of that too, one of the when I talk to my clients, and a lot of his share clients with Superfiliate, one thing that really stood out is you as a marketer have a professional reputation that is separate from the brand reputation of whoever your company is. And I'm sure all of us marketers here, we work at multiple companies throughout our career, right? It's very rare to work at one. So when you treat creators right, from that very first outreach to the contract negotiation, to working with them on a brief, the content review, and finally the payments, whether it's a creator or a talent manager, that reputation that you have as a marketer, not the brand you work at, but you personally as a marketer, will pay off dividends. A mentor used to tell me relationship is the only thing that's recession proof. It doesn't matter if AI comes and just kills the world tomorrow. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But building and cultivating those relationships really does pay off dividends, not only in your current job, but every future job that you're going to have. And paying people right, paying people fast, making it easy for them to work with you. It's just a great approach to being a marketer in this space.
Yep, I couldn't agree more with that. And that's actually how Andy and I ended up meeting, was his reputation preceded him, and someone introduced me to him, and we've never looked back, have we, Andy? So
Never.
Well, listen, guys, thank you all so much for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure. Andy, Tony, thank you very much for all your thoughts and insights. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please, do feel free to reach out to either Andy, myself, or Tony in the aftermath of this webinar. But thanks a lot, people.
Oh, I think we have one more question.
Oh, was there one more? Oh, hang on. One coming, sorry. One more question. So from Beth, are we seeing, or are you seeing the rates for creators getting out of hand? For example, they were recently quoted $25 to $30 for a single post with a creator that had 1.5 million followers, but only 45 to 50% US audience, or another with 1 million followers for 11K, but only 30% in the US. How are you handling those negotiations? Andy, over to you.
I mean, I think all, the nuance of that, there's so many parameters at play there. Are we seeing rates go up? Of course, there is a finite supply of great creators out there and audience and things like that. So I think, of course, as more budget goes this direction, it will get more competitive. I think, what we're seeing though, is in these situations, thinking about how can you be creative with the economic structure to where these creators still feel the upside that they could have while also, limiting your risk as well. And I think, that might be having to have that conversation 5 different times, and it resonates with 1 or 2 and doesn't resonate with the other 3. And just being open to like, how are we going to get creative? And I think also we're starting to see a lot more people think about longer term partnerships. So it might not, it's not this one-off thing where, yes, that budget, commitment there is extremely high. Of course, as a marketer looking at your budget, but maybe there's a way of saying, hey, we want to build this into a 6 to 12 month relationship. Here's the way that we think about staging a partnership like that. If we're able to hit these milestones, we'll feel comfortable moving forward in this way. And I think just giving a creator a line of sight on like what the, longevity of that relationship and progression of that relationship could be can sometimes allow you to get over some of those like initial hurdles when it comes to rates and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. Tony, any thoughts?
No, I think exactly what Andy said. If anyone wants like a little cheat sheet, one thing that I found somewhat works is if you structure your creator compensation as 3 parts, there's a flat fee plus spot bonus plus % commission on sales, and then you can play around those 3 different levers. So for instance, if a creator is asking for $30,000 flat fee for 1 post, you could counter with, why don't we do 20K or whatever you're comfortable with as the flat fee? It's like your base salary, right? Give bonuses tied to very specific top of funnel deliverables. So it's not so much like you're not going to pay them because they're not driving sales, but maybe if it hits certain engagement numbers or certain view counts, they get a spot bonus that brings them a little bit closer. And then finally, there's a kicker with a percentage that's uncapped, right? So you get a 5% percentage of sales that goes on. And then you explain, right? Like you need to sort of offload the upfront risk with the long-term reward. And honestly, a creator could get paid way more than 30,000 based on that structure.
Yeah, perfect. Well, listen, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I'll say it again, it's been a pleasure hosting this webinar. And Andy, Tony, thank you very much for your thoughts. Any questions that you suddenly go away and come back with, please don't hesitate to contact any one of us. But it's been a real pleasure to see you all, even though I can't see any of you. But thank you all for joining.